Shalom, everyone. Good evening. I was inspired to do this particular program, this particular shiur, because of a combination of things. One of them is, of course, Parashat Vayishlach, which we just read. But the other one is the way Chazal understand Parashat Vayishlach, which is Yaakov and Esav as brothers reflect the relationship between Israel and the Western world, which is a little bit more complicated than that. But in a nutshell, we tend to look at Esav, Yaakov's brother, as the precursor to Rome, which then basically, through adopting Christianity, becomes the Byzantine Empire and then ends up expanding into Europe and then the West. So basically, we are saying that the Western world, which is a combination, of course, of the Greeks and the Romans, but it is basically the Romans. Now, I just want to say one thing before delving into it, is that I'm very aware of the fact that this is a midrashic connection. In other words, if you'll try to figure out genetically, ethnically, what's the relationship between the Roman Empire and Esav, you might be a little bit hard-pressed to find an answer to that. There are different approaches to it. We know about the Edomians, the Edomites, who are actually the biblical Edom, who were the Nabateans in Jordan. They used to live in the south of Israel. They were force converted by the sword by the Maccabees. And when the Roman Empire allowed Jews to abolish that forced conversion, the Edomites actually maintained their Judaism, even though they were forced to it. So that brings a lot of interesting questions. For example, King Herod was an Edomian. In other words, he's half Esav, and he, as far as we're concerned, was the first main Roman king of Judea in the Second Temple period, who, of course, built the Second Temple, the Herodian period, and all that. So there is an interesting link over there, but beyond that, I would say that I don't go into how do we know and can you prove. I'm just looking at the world through the lens of our sages, through our sources, and I'm saying that, gee, they make a lot of sense. So it works. One way or another, it works. So I'm just going to take that as an axiom. I'm not going to try to prove it or disprove it. That's my working assumption. With that working assumption, I would like to go into our program. And I'm just going to mention for anybody who would be interested that that I do have a couple of my own programs that you're welcome to join. Next Sunday, I have a Culture Clash, which is a virtual tour relevant to Hanukkah. I'm also doing a Culture Clash tour in the Bible Lands Museum, and I'm almost done posting the schedule on my website. And next week, I'm flying to New York, and I'm going to be doing 2 weeks of private and public tours at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and doing some public speaking. So if this is relevant to any of you and you want to follow up, here is my website, and we'll put it in the chat, and I'll also send you details towards the end. Now let's get into our subject. The poster that I chose is from a mosaic floor from the ancient synagogue in Huqoq, which is a little northwest of the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret. Now, this is perhaps the most puzzling synagogue picture ever found. And there are many fascinating ones. If you're familiar, the Dura Europa Synagogue, which has dozens of biblical scenes made in Syria in the 3rd century. We have dozens and dozens of scenes on synagogue floors from the Byzantine period in Israel. The reason that this one is unique is because it's the only one that we have no clue what it's about. Not a clue. Jody Magnus, who is excavating from Chapel Hill University, she's excavating in Huqoq, suggests that this is the meeting of either Alexander the Great, because it looks very Greek, right? And there's elephants, and there's a bull which is 3 times the size of an elephant. The person who made this probably never saw an elephant in their life. But anyway, and he clearly looks Greek, and he's meeting some elder who looks important, who's wearing the typical Hellenistic garment of an important person with that letter H, which it's a symbol of greatness. And this scene they interpret as the meeting between Alexander the Great and the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, which is a story that we have in our sources. And another suggestion is that it is something to do with one of the later descendants of Alexander's generals. Either way, this is the only picture from the many beautiful pictures. I'll show you a couple of them in a moment. but the many beautiful pictures from the Huqoq inscription and from all over the country that seems to be depicting an extra biblical scene. That makes it unique, and it begs the question of, is that indeed the proper interpretation, or is there a way to sort of see this as a biblical story which is depicted in a contemporary fashion without being historically accurate in terms of the dress code, which that of course is common. Nobody, did anything historically that way. So let's say a little bit about the Huqoq, and if anybody's interested, reach out to me. I'll just send you the report, but you can also go to the Huqoq Excavation website. It's just Google Huqoq Excavation, and on the website they have all of the pictures and the publications that you can download online. So somebody also mentioned the Jonah, the Yonah. So that's this picture. So thank you for mentioning that. Great minds think alike. This is one of the reports, and I'm happy to send it to you. Again, it's for free on their website. And it shows you the picture of Yonah being swallowed by a fish, swallowed by a bigger fish, swallowed by a bigger fish. So they added a lot of action. There's even sirens playing instruments on the top left. So in a very Hellenistic kind of fashion, it's like it's the background and the music. And you can imagine this being on a floor and people tell the story, right? So it's kind of cool. Now, I highly recommend looking at the pictures because there's some stuff that we've never seen on this synagogue floor, like Shimshon carrying the gates of Aza and on his shoulders and tying the fox's tails with torches to send them out to burn the fields of the Philistines. It shows the famous image of the two spies holding the grapes, which is the symbol of the Ministry of Tourism, amongst others. It shows a lot of other really cool stuff that we've never seen before depicted on a synagogue floor. But this is the one I'd like to focus on, and it is the one that relates to our story. So on the left-hand side here is a dedicatory inscription in the center. It's a bit fragmented. I actually wrote a paper on this when doing my master's at YU, so I know it very intimately, but I'd like to focus on this scene. My professor at YU, Professor Stephen Fine, suggested that this is probably Yaakov meeting Esav. Yaakov meeting Esav. Now, I'm going to raise some of the questions that remain with this understanding, but I'm going to refer to this back when we get through the story. So Esav is a redhead. There he is. Esav is associated with Rome. Kind of looks Roman. You can pull that off. And Esav is coming with an army to meet his brother Jacob, who we understand is an older man at the time. They're all like, if you look at the biblical chronology, he's probably in his 70s, maybe a little bit younger. So who are all these people around him with their swords? We could discuss. There is a possibility of understanding this as the Midrash saying that Yaakov had angels who went ahead and fought his brother. And then when he said, I see your face like seeing the face of God, please take my blessings. And he's like, oh God, like I just, fought angels. There's a lot of Midrashic stuff going on, which was written in Israel at this time. So it's plausible. I'm not coming to write a paper on this. I'm just giving some ideas. And you see that he's pointing up while Esav is pointing to his heart, right? Like, I, my brother, have lots of stuff. And he's like, God has given me everything. So there's a conversation, but the weird part is what is going on here below. Now, here's where some people make a Hanukkah connection. I'll give you a second to figure out why. We have some interesting clues. Look at the top of the niches in which the different people are seated in. At the center is the elder, which we saw at the top, right? And they all have an oil lamp on top of their head, and there's exactly 9 of them, just like a Hanukkah menorah. Now, what exactly is going on in this picture? Who are these people? Is the number a symbolic number? Does it matter? How could they be the tribes if it's the wrong number? I have no clue. Honestly, I have no clue. But I'm also pointing out that below them are the, I guess, spoils of war or the dead animals that we see above here with whoever this is. So there's elephants. Nobody fought Alexander the Great, and definitely not the Jews, and we didn't defeat him. So that doesn't add up. So there are questions here, obviously, but when we examine such very ancient pictures, we have to control for our bias, which is, well, what is the one-to-one correlation? Open your mind, think out of the box. Maybe one day we'll be able to really figure out what is going on in this picture. Anyway, that was the suggestion which my professor Stephen Fine mentioned, and I'm going to run with that for our purpose. Now let's move on to our story. So we have a bunch of sources to discuss, and there are so many sources in Chazal, in our Midrashic literature, and in the Talmud, which expand on these details. And because it is so much, I'm going to spare you the textual overload, and I'm going to simply refer to them conversationally. And if anybody wants any further sources, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm very easy to find. The Museum Guy Israel, just Google it, you'll find me. So let's go through the biblical story of the connection between Yaakov and Esav, and through that point out different relevant issues which have to do with the Western world and Israel. And I hope that we gain insights from there that will help us where at the time where we're living in today. So it's written in Hebrew. I'm going to basically paraphrase it. So Rebecca is pregnant, right? She has twins, and she's trying to figure out what is going on. So the kids are scurrying about in her womb, and she says, "Im ken lama ze anochi," and anochi. It's important to mention that in biblical Hebrew, in Lashon HaKodesh, the word anochi is an existential reference. It's not ani, as in I. It is anochi, it is my being. For example, the first of the 10 commandments is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am defining myself as the Lord, the God, your Lord, who has taken you out of Egypt. That is how I define myself in relationship to you, which implies thou shalt not have any other gods, because I'm defining myself as the one with a relationship. So you could do this with every time that Anochi shows up in Tanakh. It is a definition of my existence, an existential question. Adam tells God when he's hiding in the Garden of Eden, "Va'ira ki erom anochi." I am bereft, I am completely existentially naked. I have nothing of my own, right? And so on and so forth. So she's asking, what is going on with me? Why is there no rest within me? Like, what is this? So she goes to beseech God, and God tells her the following: there are two nations in your womb. Shnei goyim bebitnech, u'shnei leumim mima'ich yiparedu. Le'om is a tricky term to translate, but let's just say a very loosely translated nation. Two nations will separate from your womb. Ule'om mile'om ye'ematz v'ravi avod tza'ir. One le'om will overpower the other one, or encourage the other one for greatness. There's different ways to understand it. V'ravi avod tza'ir. The elder shall serve the younger. In other words, there is a relationship between the two, up and down, and we're going to get back to that. The second part is she's about to give birth, and behold, there are twins. The first one comes out, he's completely red, basically like a red robe, ke'aderet se'ar, or a cape, vayikri'u shemo Esav, kind of like the Sumerian cape that's made of feathers, a very feathery kind of robe. Think Flintstones, I guess. So they called him Esav, Esau. Esav also means asui, like ready-made. In other words, he's already mature. He's all hairy and stuff. That's kind of what it means. His brother emerged holding on to his brother's heel, so they called him Mr. Heel. Yaakov, he who shall heal, grab you by the heel. And so that's the story. Now, the naming of them is crucial throughout their lives. Our name, which is Israel, is Yaakov's name. We can talk about that. And of course, there's the next name that Esav is given. So before we move on, let's look at least a couple of sources on this reference. So there are two nations in your belly. Two nations will come out of you, and one will be on top, the other will serve the older, right? So the Talmud in Brachot says that this is to be read not goyim, but rather geim. Two aristocrats shall emerge from you. And Rabbi Yehuda says these are Rebbe and Antoninos. Now, Rebbe, the redactor of the Mishnah, who redacted the Mishnah around the year 200, give or take, was in close contact with the Roman Empire under the Antonine dynasty. So we know of a bunch of Roman emperors who have the name Antoninus in their name. Don't be misled to say the one Antoninus Pius is him, because he was very cruel to the Jews shortly after the Bar Kokhba revolt and 50, 60 years too early. It's probably the one who's known as Caracalla, whose name was like Marcus Aurelius Augustus Pius. So like he's got Antoninus in his name somewhere. And it's referring to them, and it's showing shelo pasak mishulchanam lo tznon velo chazeret velo kishuin lo bimot hachama velo bimot hagshamim. Now this is in the context of blessing over gourds and vegetables, so it's just mentioning, by the way, that these two aristocrats had access to foods which are not in their season all year round, which we take for granted today because of international trade. But or like you bring in avocados year round, you don't even know what it means to not have a fruit or a vegetable. It's not in season, right? Unless you're careful about how much you actually pay, and you realize that's why it costs that much when it's not in season. Export, import, all that stuff. Anyway, that's one. The other source is a very fascinating one. In Megillah, talks about Caesarea, and Yerushalayim. Now remember, we referenced Herod beforehand. King Herod built the city of Caesarea Maritima in honor of the Emperor Augustus, who he had very close connections with. And in Chazal's worldview, Caesarea represents Rome. Right? It's named after Caesar. That's close enough. So it says as following: Caesarea and Jerusalem. If somebody will tell you both of them have been destroyed, don't believe it. Both of them are settled, don't believe it either. Caesarea is in ruins and Jerusalem is settled, or Jerusalem is settled and Caesarea Jerusalem is destroyed, Caesarea is settled, believe it. As it says, Imal'ah charava, it's another verse. If one of them is filled or settled, the other one is destroyed, and vice versa. In other words, we're taking seriously the premonition, the prophecy that Rivka had about the relationship between her two children, which is why she felt an existential crisis. What is going on within me? What is the sense where something is unsettled? Because when one is up, the other is down, but they're always in conversation, in balance with each other, right? If you want, look at the rise of Israel now and what's happening in the West, and you could try to make conversation about this. Okay, but we're going to take it further than that. Now let's go on to just the last verse, which is Rav Nachum Bar Yitzchak says, you don't have to go as far as some arcane biblical verse, which is hard to understand, even to me as an Israeli. Use that verse. Le'omi ematz. That's the prophecy that she had. That's it. That's all you need. Okay. So far, so good. Now let's turn on to the next story. Speaking of names, now these are all pictures generated by AI, so I didn't have time to try to make it a little bit more modest or accurate. It is what it is, okay? But it's fun. So here comes along teenage Esav. He's a serious, like, macho guy, ladies guy, as we know. Like, he's out there in the field and he's hunting, and he comes back home. He is exhausted, right? And remember the word anochi, right? He comes and he sees Yaakov cooking this stew, this dish, and as a chef will tell you, the stew is going to turn green when it's ready. The fact that it's red means he's not even waiting for it to be cooked yet, right? So Yaakov is making this lentil, and Esav comes out of the field and he's exhausted. And Esav says to Yaakov, "Haliteni na," basically pour it down, pour that red stuff down my throat, because I'm exhausted. Ki ayef anochi, I am existentially, I'm tired of it all. I'm sick of it all. I don't even bother me to give it the proper name, or just pour it down my throat. Haliteni al ken kara shemo Edom, and therefore he was called Big Red. Edom. The reason he's called Edom is because he says, just give me some of that red. Me want red stuff. Me red. You red. Now, it seems comical. Like, why would you call him Big Red or Mr. Red just because he said, give me some of me want some red? But you see, at this moment, in his exhaustion, or some sort of existential crisis that he went through. Chazal say that Abraham died at that time. He said, how could the attribute of justice hurt this holy man? How could he have possibly died? Whatever it is, it's clearly an existential crisis, because ayef anochi. So they called him red because he basically revealed his deepest inclination at that time. And so that's the name that stuck. We're going to get back to this. So then Yaakov does the most amazing thing, which seems like a horrible example of taking advantage of your brother when he's at his lowest. He says, why don't you sell me your birthright as being the firstborn? Like, what does this have anything to do with the conversation? It's such a horrible move, right? It seems like, talk about names, the name Yaakov, I'll grab you by the heel, I'll get you when you're down. Like, why would Yaakov do that? It is such a strange conversation. It's such a non sequitur. We'll get back to that when Yaakov and Esav meet. So anyway, but Yaakov recognizes, he pierces to the heart of what Esav really wants, and he understands that if Esav is existentially tired and this is what he wants, then he clearly does not want what comes with being the firstborn. That is understood. So Esav says, you know what? You're right. We're all going to die. Who cares about being the firstborn? Swear. I'll swear. Just pour the stuff down my throat. Esav eats, and then he basically looks down at the whole concept of being the firstborn condescendingly. We don't hear from this again for the next few decades. All right? That's that story. Now, let's get on to the next story, and that's the story of the blessing. So the story of the blessing, ignore the people in the background. This is all AI. It is what it is, okay? So we have an amazing conversation with Rivka, who convinces her son Yaakov, who's a basically goody two-shoes, to learn how to be a cheat, basically lending to the stigma and stereotype of Jews throughout history, right? Go ahead and steal the blessings from your brother. That is a very important conversation to have, and it is worthy of an entire class. Today, I'm going to focus specifically on the relationship between Yaakov and Esav as foreshadowing the relationship between the historic Israel and Rome. That's what I want to point out. So at this point, Esav is already coming in after his brother leaves. It's like a revolving door. Yaakov leaves, Esav comes in. And when Esav comes in, Yitzchak is terrified. He's like, holy heck, what just happened? So who is this person who came and he hunted and he bring and I ate and I blessed him? May he also be blessed. Now, that itself is a fantastic statement, because he's basically saying, that little son of a gun, he fooled me. God bless him. Like what is going on here? Okay. Again, that's something that's worthy of a further conversation. As Esav hears those words, he screams a great and bitter scream. Vayitzak tza'aka gedola umara ad me'od, vayomer le'aviv barcheni gam ani avi. Please, Daddy, please bless me too. Now, those words, Vayitzak tza'aka gedola umara ad me'od, here's where I'm inserting another source from the Talmud, which I'm not going to put in here. I'm just going to mention it. And that is the story of Purim. In the story of Purim, we have the descendant of Yaakov, Vayizak zaka gedola umara. The great grandson of Yaakov is now in the position of shouting a great terrible cry, when the great grandson of Esav, Haman, is able to overpower him and threaten him with annihilation. Right? So there is an interesting conversation there. And the one thing I'm going to say about that, remember that Edom's name, Esav's name Edom, comes from the existential exhaustion with dealing with all this stuff. I just want the enjoyment of this lentil stew here and now. I don't want to deal with anything else, anything in the future, and leave me out of it, right? The one time in Esav's life where he really, deeply, genuinely cared is this moment. And this moment produced the one descendant of Esav who really cares and can't be bought off with gifts and money, as we'll see later, and that is Amalek. So Amalek, again, is a topic in and of itself, more appropriate for Purim, but the way we understand Amalek is the person who will who will risk everything, even their own life, just to make a point, to hurt Yisrael in some kind of way. We could say the precursor to postmodernism today. In other words, trying to attack the people who claim meaning and saying nothing matters equally, and unless you say that there is, right? Again, that's something that is worthy of another conversation. So this is the blessing. Now here's the really cool part. So he says to his listen, my son, your brother came and cheated me. He fooled me. He stole your blessing. And then Esav says, wow, dang, no wonder they call him Yaakov. He Yaakoved me twice. He stole my birthright, and now he stole my blessing. He's like, that little, right? And he says, but daddy, don't you have at least a blessing for me? Now Yitzchak says, listen, my son, I have already made him a gvir, somebody who's an aristocrat, basically, on top of you, because I created this relationship where the younger brother will serve the older brother. I already gave him that. I've given him mital hashamayim mishmei haaretz. I've given him the blessings of the earth. I've given him the servitude of his brothers. What else is there to bless you with? It seems like there isn't another option. And here's where Esav says, maybe daddy, please, 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 pretty please. And he cries. So Yitzchak says, okay, let me give you a blessing. Now dig this. You will basically get all the fat of the earth, right? Which before the 1960s anti-fat propaganda by the sugar industry, fat was a positive word, right? Mishmanei haaretz, like the fatty, the creme de la creme. Umitala shamayim me'al, you will get the dew from the heavens above. Ve'al charbecha tichye, you shall live by the sword. This is a key phrase, which you can understand that our Chazal identify with Rome because of Rome's sword, the way that with the Roman Empire basically took over the world with their approach to warfare. Okay? Ve'etachicha ta'avod, you will serve your brother. However, and here's the clause, ve'hayaka asher tarid ufarakta ulo me'al tzavarecha, which as Chazal understand, Rashi also explains it here, when you have the opportunity, you can throw your brother's yoke off of your neck. Meaning to say, as we understand it like this, when you have the opportunity to prove that your brother illegitimately stole the blessings which are appropriate for you because of how you conduct yourself, you will be able to subjugate him and overpower him. So in other words, he basically created a balance by saying your brother will be the rightful receiver of those blessings as long as he is held to the high standard that he needs to be in to be worthy of them. But if he isn't acting in that way, then you could overpower him. And that is an amazing precursor to the way we look at history, or foreshadowing the way we look at history. Because there's always this conversation about Jews being successful. How successful are you? And there's always going to be like, oh, they stole the money, they control the. I mean, you can talk about the protocol of the elders of Zion. You name it. Jews control the media. Jews control the world. And like, what is this obsession that the Western world has with where Jews get their money from or how moral they are? Like, it's this incredible double standard. But this is in the definition of the relationship between Israel and the West. Right? In other words, you have to come clean. You have to be completely moral all the time, or else they will get you on something that they wouldn't even dream of accusing anybody else of, but they're going to get you. It's an incredible thing. Now, that itself is a fascinating thing. Okay, let's move on to the next story. We have two more stories. So Jacob's Ladder. I'm not referring to the horror movie about the Vietnam War, but I do recommend seeing Jacob's Ladder. It's a horror movie, but it's a fascinating movie. But Yaakov's Ladder. So Yaakov is running away from his brother Esav, and he is on his way to find a wife and start a new life, right? Running away from his brother. And in his dream, he sees this heavenly ladder going from heaven to earth, and there are these angels going up and down the ladder. I didn't ask AI to make angels because it always makes everything look very, very Christian. So I have to find a creative way to do something cool, but this is one of several examples I was able to put together. So he sees as follows. God is standing on top of him. and saying, I am the Lord of your father Abraham and Isaac, Yitzchak. The land that you are laying down on it shall be to yours and your offspring. Fine. Now, the interesting thing is the way we look at this in the midrashically. What is going on with these malachei Elohim olim v'yordim bo, these angels going up and down? So the Medrash Tanchuma has a couple different exegetes about this. We'll go through a couple of them. So Rabbi Shimon bar Nachman says these angels are the ministers of the nations of the world. In other words, it represents them. So basically, it teaches you that God is showing Avraham, the minister of Bavel, going up 70 rungs and going down. So a rung represents a year. Babylon ruled for 70 years since the destruction of the temple till the Cyrus proclamation. V'shel Madai 52. So the Medians, the Persians, 52. Remember that according to the Seder Olam, the Tannaitic chronology, the Persian Empire had about 4 kings and lasted 52 years, whereas in conventional chronology, about 11 kings and 210 years. But that's a story for another time, but that's where the number 52 comes from. The Greeks, 100 years, and then they go down, and then Edom goes, and it just keeps on going. You can't even count anymore. And at that point, Yaakov is terrified, and he says, maybe he will never come down, which means world domination, of course. It's clear what that means at this point. So God says to him, Al tira avdi Yaakov, al tichat Israel, do not fear my servant Jacob, do not be scared, Israel. In other words, even if he gets up all the way to heaven to me, I will bring him down. As we quote from Ovadia, the prophet who was a ger, a convert from Edom, which we read as the Haftarah of Vayishlach, im tagbia kanesher, ve'im ben kochavim sim kinecha, if you will rise like the eagles, which in the area of Edom, there actually are eagles who live in the, it's defining their terrain. So if you'll be as high as the eagles and you'll be there between the stars, I will bring you down from there. In other words, there will be an end to Rome, but it seems like there's no end in sight. Now, before we move on to the next one, I just want to mention a couple very important correlations with the connection to the Western world in Edom. First of all, the eagle. Now, the eagle, of course, is the symbol of the Roman Empire, the vulture. And it's clear, if you actually read Yehuda Felix, who's an expert on the flora and fauna of the biblical world, the Nesher mentioned in Ovadia is not the vulture of the Roman Empire, but it's close enough symbolically that Chazal make that connection, and they see that relationship, right? The other one is that we basically look at the Western world as Rome, which adopted Christianity, became the Byzantine Empire, became the Western world, and then discovered the New World and continued in America. And you could basically say, I mean, this is already us continuing this logical progression. Obviously, Chazal didn't live in the founding of the United States, but the founding fathers of the United States were very conscious of the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, both the literature and the symbology, and they used those in formulating the Republic of the United States, forming it in terms of the architecture, like just off the top of my head, the Thomas Jefferson Rotunda in Virginia, like it's the Roman Forum, right? The concept of the eagle as the symbol of America, the fiscus, whatever it's called, it's a symbol that's used with the hatchet that has like 13 sticks connecting it. That's the 13 states from the original republic, and all these different things like the veto, the Senate, a lot of different things. The founding fathers were very, very conscious of this and made it an active part of the United States. So we do see there's this connect, and it's just going on for almost 2,000 years. Edom just keeps on going. Don't worry, Yaakov, he will come down one day. But here's the next medrash, which is really cool. So at this point, God says, how about you, Yaakov? Why don't you go up? Why don't you continue to assert yourself in some sort of, world domination, or take your role, climb the ladder? And Yaakov says, no, I will not do it. Now, there's different versions of this medrash about Yaakov's refusal to assert himself over the world, to the point where he is heavily criticized in many of our sources, and I'll get into a few more examples when he and Esav actually meet. But Yaakov refuses to climb the ladder. One of the reasons is, he says, I'm not ready yet. My children are not ready yet. The Jewish people, as he wouldn't call us the Jews, of course, the people of Israel are not capable of that level of, you could say, physical involvement and manifestation without it corrupting them. Right? He was deeply convinced of that. We cannot go up. So that's the different medrash that I'm showing here. And God says, listen, if you go up, nobody can take you down. Won't do it. I refuse to do it. Do you understand that this comes at the cost of subjugation by the other nations? I don't care. I'm not doing it. Right? We're not ready. I'm going to take my sweet time. And on that note, our final story, the meeting of Yaakov and Esav. So the meeting of Yaakov and Esav has an incredible amount of nuance in it, to the point where the Gemara in Sanhedrin actually says that every single time Rebbe, who was very close, some say personally close, with Antoninus, with the emperor of Rome, would revisit the story and even completely change his official letters to Antoninus, just to account for the nuances in the story. And there are parts where in the story where Chazal say at the very first part of the Roman connection to Israel, they were on our side. They came and helped us in these different areas. But then they took a different approach, which happens later in the conversation with Esav, where they were hostile to us. In other words, we see the nuanced relationship, the meeting between Yaakov and Esav as foreshadowing very important aspects of history. And I really wish we had the time to do even half of them, but we'll do a few of them. So Esav runs towards his brother and tries to kiss him or to bite him. You may be familiar with the ambivalence, and the ambivalence is deep because he loves him and he hates him at the same time, and he can't make up his mind, right? So those the dots on top of the word vayishakeu, which was second from the last on the top line, is there to mark that ambivalence. Is it he biting him, or is he really wholeheartedly crying for him and sorry about what happened? Okay. Now he lifts his eyes and he sees this great horde. His brother left with the skin on his back and came back with all of this. And he says, "Who is this?" He says, "These are the children who the Lord has graced your servant." Now he calls himself the servant. He's calling Esav, his brother, "I am your servant," which has a lot of nuance and hinting to the relationship between them, basically saying, don't poke the bear. Now he poked the bear by preparing for him in the first place, but put that aside for a moment. He's trying to say, I'm down below. Yeah, I have some stuff. It's very nice, but it's all good. You're on top. Okay. The next part. So Esav says, like, so what about all those gifts that you saw before? He's like, well, that's just so my master will find favor in my eyes. So Esav says, my brother, I have enough. Why don't you keep your gifts? And that's probably the conversation going on in this picture on the mosaic floor. My brother, I have enough. And we all know he's saying, no, I don't want it. But with the other hand, he's taking the gifts. He's keeping the gifts. It's just kind of like this Middle Eastern negotiating. If like from Monty Python, Life of Brian, you have to haggle, right? It's like, no, I don't want this. Of course, no, but keep it coming, right? So there's that very interesting thing going on. Okay. So now Yaakov says to him, please, my brother, please take these gifts from me. I am seeing your face now. It's like I've seen the face of the Lord. So please take it. And he's like, wait, who have you, son? You've done now. This might be a reference to him struggling with an angel before, and he's like, I'm not going to mess with this guy. So wait a minute. If you're telling me that you could wrestle with God, which is where the name Yisrael comes from, Ki sarita im Elohim, you struggle with God. If you're interested in this, by the way, this is the name of Jordan Peterson's upcoming book, right? Struggling with God, and he's referring to this. He talks about it, so I'm very curious what he's going to write about. But anyway, he's basically showing Esav, listen, if I would want to, I could destroy you. But please, my master, take my gifts from me. So Esav was like, sure, my brother, of course, whatever you say. It's like, what is he doing? So he says, please, Chanani Elohim v'yesh li kol, I have all that I could ever want. Take it from me. Now, there's a lot of nuance here because there's this interesting conversation of showing him on the one hand that he has everything, that he's struggled with God, that he can make it with Lavan, who's trying to cheat him 10 times a day, and he survived and became wealthy. I mean, he does have the power, theoretically, to destroy Esav. So why is he prostrating himself and making himself look subservient? What is he doing? There's a lot of conversation to have here. And I want to just keep our minds open to looking into this and exploring it. Here is the key phrase. Esav says, "My brother, let us travel together. I will walk before you." Esav is offering Yaakov a partnership. And this is where the Gemara says, the Talmud says, that at the beginning of the relationship between Rome and Judea, the Romans were good to us because they basically followed what this verse foreshadows. Now, why would Yaakov turn this down? It's an incredible thing. Yaakov says to him the most outrageous thing. Listen, the kids are very soft. The kids who in 2 days from now are going to slaughter an entire city. The kids are young, and the sheep and the bulls, it's too much. If you push them a little too hard, all the sheep are going to die. What? It's just such a bizarre, what is he doing? So he says, why not my master just go ahead and pass before his servant, and me, I'm going to take my time because there's so much work to do, and there's diapers to change, and the kids, and the this. I'll catch up with you in Seir. In these few verses, Chazal see that he defined the rest of history, not defined the rest of history, condemned Jews to being subjugated and tortured and humiliated by Esav for millennia. Like the Zohar has very horrible things to say about Yaakov for this. He gets a lot of criticism. It's like, what are you doing? You're handing him the keys? I mean, you had it. It's like, climb the ladder. I refuse to climb the ladder. You, my brother, take the lead. You, my brother, go ahead. It's like, why is he doing this? Like, you could have spared a Holocaust. This is what has to be done. I'm willing to pay the price. Like, why? Right? Now, here is a really, before we wrap up, there's a very profound insight here, and that has to do with the nuance that relates to the blessings. Okay, so Esav says to him, "How about I leave a few of my people with you? I'll go ahead, but I'll leave some people with you." And Yaakov says to Esav, "No, please, don't worry. I don't want to keep you up." And Esav goes on his way to Seir. Now, I'm going to introduce some of the nuanced conversation that's going on here, the way Chazal understand it. Number one, there is in the subtext addressing the blessings that were taken. Yaakov says to Esav, "Kachnat birchati." Take, where is that here? Let's go back to see that verse. Okay, take my blessing. Now, if there is any word, where is it? I didn't keep that. I skipped a few of the verses, but he says, "My brother, take my blessing." Now, if you think about the worst historic Freudian slip, he has been spending 22 years preparing for that meeting Esav, hoping, probably muttering to himself, "Don't mention the blessings. Don't mention the blessings. Don't mention the blessings. Take my blessing. I mean gift." Like what? It's like the worst thing possible to say. Here is a fantastic, fantastic insight. Ladies and gentlemen, Yaakov is telling Esav, if you really want those blessings, go ahead, take them. And there's one medrash that even goes as far as to say, they actually made a contract where he says to Esav, "Here, we'll switch our blessings." Esav goes home, of course, this is a medrash, but it brings out the beauty of the nuance. Esav comes home to his wife and he's like, "Hey, honey, guess what I have? Remember that story about my brother Jacob? He just signed and I got it back. Great, honey. What's in the document?" He starts reading it, and all this stuff has something to do with the world to come and this and that, and like the way we understand it. It's like, what? Go beg him to reverse the contract. You don't want that, right? What happens here, ladies and gentlemen, is Yaakov caught to the second time to the heart of what Esav really deeply existentially wants. He says to Esav, listen, I know you don't know it yet, but you really don't want these blessings. I'll do you the favor of letting you try. Historically, where does this happen? Where Esav tries to become Yaakov and live in a world in which I don't want to assert my physicality, my materialism. I will try to live in a way that connects me to the world, to cut all that stuff. That is Christianity. That is Christianity. It's when we say Judeo-Christian values, that is Esav trying to be Yaakov, and that brought out the worst in Esav. The worst. He's miserable. He can't enjoy this world. And the one thing that Esav got in the blessing, which other than the up and down relationship, the idea of hine mital hashamayim moshavecha. He's basically saying mishmanei hashamayim. He's saying the word hine. This is a Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, which is a more later midrash, says that the one important difference between the blessings of Yaakov and Esav is the word hine. Here it is. Take it. Right? Have it. You don't need accountability for it. You don't need to work for it. It's yours. Go and enjoy this world. That really answers the question of how could Yitzchak in one breath say, I don't have any more blessings for you, but here's the exact same blessing. Because the blessing of Yaakov comes with responsibility, and yours is not. It's just take it. Now, where do we see this in Esav? Before we get into the idea of Christianity, which corrupted Esav, that it's basically this. Esav, this is also in the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, the gematria, the numerical value of Ayin Shin Yud Vav is the same as Shalom, as peace, meaning to say, Esav really just wants to live in peace, wants to enjoy this world. And there's more midrashim that basically say, for example, Ya'an dam saneta dam yerdofcha. Since you hated blood, blood will pursue you. In other words, you are so interested in really forming the world the way you want it, enjoying the world as it is. You don't even want to engage in warfare. That will cause so much blood on your hands you can't imagine. Now look at what is happening in the Western world today, that because it refuses to accept the fact that we are really genuinely at war and we need to act like it's war, completely forgetting about how the United States acted in World War II. That is completely out of the question. We can't even engage in that conversation. You'll be censored. You can't actually have, they don't want war anymore. And I'm not even talking about Israel. Look at what's happening in Eastern Europe, in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, just throw money on the problem so it will go away. We don't want war. And pulling out of Afghanistan, I mean, you name it, right? The amount of blood that is caused by Esav's refusal to engage in blood has to do with his nature. I don't really want war. I really want to just enjoy this life. And that's what we see in the concept in the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness. I just want to pursue happiness. That's it. It's an incredible thing. So you see the amount of nuance that is going on, and where Yaakov basically says to Esav, listen, brother, I know what you want better than you know what you want. You really don't want to take my blessings, because if you do, you will not enjoy a single moment of your life. And as soon as the United States, sorry, not the United States, as soon as the Western world, which we're saying is Esav, basically separated church and state, it has created science and the Western world and enlightenment. I mean, it's like they're starting to actually enjoy life again and developing this world. So when we say that Yaakov refuses, I'll end with this, Yaakov refuses to climb the ladder, he lets Esav go forward. He gives him the keys to history. He says, this is your world. You develop it. I'll come and catch up with you at the end, not you catch up with me. I'll catch up with you at the end when you're all ripe and ready, and then we'll make something out of this. But you go and develop this world, because this is what your destiny is. And if you try to take my role, you will not enjoy 1 minute of it. So in summary, the relationship between Yaakov and Esav has a lot of nuances which foreshadow the complex relationships between Israel and the Western world. And just by looking at that, without trying to get into the reductionist scientific conversations about how could it possibly work, it works in some way or another. Look into it and try to find insights that can help us deal with these times and see what is really the appropriate way for us to act and when is the appropriate way for us to act. So I'm going to wrap up with that and one more public service announcement, and then I'll turn over if there's any questions. I know that we have to end in a few. So this is our story with the climbing of the ladder, as we saw before. And I'm just mentioning again that this coming Sunday, assuming, of course, we have enough people signed up, like, 5, 6 is enough, a virtual tour. It's all on my website. Tours, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, tours in the Bible Lands Museum. I haven't put up the schedule, but it's going to be like 12:30 and 3 o'clock, and then tours at the Met. Feel free to reach out. Thank you very much, everyone. It has been a pleasure, and I will happily take questions now for the, I guess, few minutes that we have. Or Dale, you want to manage this, or should I just let Tamar Tessler want to? Oh, hi, Tamar.
Whoever has anything to say, just unmute yourself and direct your comments to Nachliel.
Hi, Tamar. Good to see your name.
Tamar, your hand is up. We're assuming that you have something to say, or maybe it was just a mistake. I don't know. Okay. Anyone have any questions? I found this fascinating. You are absolutely brilliant in your presentations and the way you just bring the biblical story into modern perspectives, and it just seems to all fit and make sense. And Bezrat Hashem, Naseh v'Netzliach, and Yaakov will be the ascendant and the power, and will come to a point of being able to actually be living in harmony and brotherhood with all other peoples in the world, and it should be for a blessing. Bezrat Hashem. Everyone doing their part and respectfully acknowledging everyone's part, the spirituality, the physical development of the world, and then together we can build a better world. Bezrat Hashem.
Amen. Thank you. I just said before we close the chat, I know you have 3 more minutes till we have to finish. I put contact information and website information in the chat for anybody who wants to copy paste it. We'll give you a minute to do so. Wow. Tamar Tessler. Are you the Tamar Tessler I know from New York? Yes, you are. Wow. It's been a while. Hi, Rob. It's good to see you again. See if there's any other names that I recognize here. Rini Hirsch. Hi. Battle Elephants, Apocryphal, 4th Maccabees. Yes. Well, question is, what did they know at the time? But yeah, I hear Rob. Okay. All right. Feel free to reach out. It would be my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Nachliel.
Till our next one, after when I come back in January, maybe we can do another class on something.
We'll discuss it, and
you do it then on the same story about Yitzchak and Yishmael.
Yeah, we could talk about Yitzchak and Ishmael. We can talk about Islam. We can talk about a lot of things.
Not Islam, but about Yitzchak. The same. They are also 2 brothers, and there are some similarities and a lot of discrepancies. So
yes, there's a lot to discuss about those relationships as foreshadowing people or nations that are attributed to them. Even though also with Ishmael, like it's not clear that there's a direct relationship between Ishmael and Islam. Obviously,
no, I know, but
right. But it's a midrashic connection. But just like with Esav, like it seems to work on several different levels. On others, it might not. But there is value to gain from looking into it. There's very interesting things that connect, like the Quran, to different later midrashim, and Avram secretly visiting Ishmael and testing his wife and seeing if he likes her or not. Then she didn't treat him like a proper guest, so he got the hint and divorced her and married a new one. Like all these very interesting. And the second one's name is Fatima. It's like really cool stuff, really weird stuff going on, which is worthy of conversation. Maybe another time.
And the Muslims say that they come from Ishmael.
Right, they do. They do, and they transpose the story of the Akedah and Avram leaving Ur to leaving Mecca and to the Akedah being with Ishmael. Right, very conveniently they swap it over. But there's a lot to be had. Like if you want to understand the idea of tribes and Avraham and this, like you really have to understand Bedouin culture. There's a lot of literature on this. It really helps understand the Middle East. You can't really understand the Middle East without understanding the law of the desert. right? You can't come in with Western ideas and understand what's happening in the Middle East. That's very clear.
So teach us.
I would say Moti Kedar is much more of an expert than me. I just binge his videos, Mordechai Kedar, and others, but he's really good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
Hanukkah Sameach. Everyone enjoy the Festival of Lights. Light your Chanukiot. Bask in its light. May the light live on.
והנוחות לך לגרש.
Bezrat Hashem.
To Azen.
Bye-bye.